Was it possible? Had his dream come true? Jacob could hear his mother whistling in the kitchen. He ran to the kitchen. The rest of the family was sitting at the table for breakfast. Stephen had such a great smile, he looked like everything was wonderful in his world. Guess what Jacob was having for breakfast? Who can tell me what Jacob was having for breakfast? Thank you for raising your hand and not yelling out. Class, what was Jacob having for breakfast? Milkshake! Jacob, let's see if you got it. Right? Sitting there on the table was a milkshake. Jacob's wish had come true. Everyone had lips and he could finally drink a milkshake. All right. Now, boys and girls, you know what I want you to do for me? How many of you enjoyed that story? All right. That was an exciting story, wasn't it? I want you to look at these words that are highlighted in yellow. Who can tell me, raise your hand and tell me what this first word that's highlighted in yellow, what part of speech is it? That's what I need to know. Elvin? It's a verb. Now, let's look at it. Spell it for me. Now, it has an ending on it. What is that ending? Elvin? What is that ending on eating? Right here. What is this ending? Ing. And what does it mean? Who can help Elvin out? Thank you.
It means present.
He said it means present. And I like the way you answered a complete sentence. And that's how I want you to answer. What does an ing mean? It means
present.
No, it doesn't mean present. We're going to work on it. Let me tell you. Ing means that it's happening now. Now, what am I doing? Running, skipping, right? So whenever the ing is on it, it means it is happening now. And I'm going to give you a new word for that. It's the progressive tense, because progressive means it's happening right now. Okay? Now let's look at another word. So what does progressive tense mean? Raise your hand, tell me, what did I say? Progressive tense mean. It's happening now. Who can think of another verb when it's happening now with progressive? We got eating. What else? Running. What else? Jogging. All right. We'll go to somebody else.
Flipping.
That means that it's happening now. All right. So let's look at, I want everybody to look at this word right here. Drink. Who can give me the progressive tense of that word? Drink. Give me the progressive tense of that word. Just give me that word like we know eating.
We'll drink.
No, that you're giving me the future tense. But I just want the ing. If drink will become what? Drinking. Very good. Jog will become what? Jogging. All right. Now, before we go on, Miss Horton is going to tell you some more tenses of verbs, because you're going to use your dry erase board. Now, who can tell me the first person tense? Who can tell me the first person? The first person is always I. Everybody point to yourself. So what is the first person?
I.
What is your first person?
I.
What is your first person? Miss Bowman, your first person is what?
I.
I. Always I. Okay? So we know progressive is what? ing. First person is what? I. All right. Now we're going to talk about some other tenses of verbs. Now I'm going to read this to you. Today, you will learn about irregular verbs or troublesome verbs. And I want you to tell me, which one of these do we want to call them? Because you know what? Some of them give me trouble. Some of them give me trouble not in the progressive tense, because all verbs are the same with progressive tense. Not in the first person I. I don't have any trouble with that. But there's some other tenses that we're going to learn about today that these verbs, they give Miss Horton trouble. So we're going to decide if we're going to call them troublesome verbs or irregular verbs. I want you to think about that, okay? Because you're going to learn about verbs, irregular verbs, or troublesome verbs. Why? Because it is one of the things third graders are expected to know. Why should you know about them, boys and girls? It's expected of you to know it. This is what you learn in third grade. Why are you getting up? Have a seat. I didn't tell you to get up, neither did she. Okay? It is important that you understand irregular verbs. You know why? Because unlike other verbs, you know what they do? What do? They change their spelling to show the past tense. They change their spelling. They change their spelling to show the past tense. What do I mean by past tense? Who can give me a verb with a past tense? Played. That's right, played. How do we know it's past tense? It has an ED. Ooh, let's give Kelsey a hand clap. One. I said a hand clap. Great. Who can give me another verb with the past tense?
Beat it.
All right.
You're saying beat it.
I know. Give me another one.
Walk it.
Huh?
Walk.
He said walked.
He said, all right. Okay. All right. Thank you. Very good. But these troublesome verbs, you know what they don't have on the end? They do not have an ED on the end. So you know what I have to do? I got to remember them. Just like I remember my multiplication facts. Just like I remember 1 1 is 2. I have to remember the spelling of these verbs. Why? It's important to remember the past tense form of these verbs because you will need to know them when you are reading stories, writing sentences, making cards. How many of you are going to make a Christmas card for your mom or your grandmother? So you need to know the right tense of that verb to write. But you also need to understand what you're reading. Knowing when the action takes place is very important. At the end of the lesson today, boys and girls, you are expected to know some irregular verbs. And you're going to write sentences using the present tense and past tense of these verbs. First, I'm going to show you these verbs and how they are used in sentences. Then we will practice together. And you know what? It's going to be so much fun how we practice. And at the end of the lesson, you know what? I want you to show me what you've learned. And you will be assessed or tested with an expectation of 80% accuracy. You know what? That way, I will know that you know what I want you to know. So what does Miss Horton want you to know? Miss Horton wants you to know these irregular verbs. Why is it important? Because these are some of the things that third graders need to know. I want you to talk with people at your table and tell them what Miss Horton just talked about. Tell each other about irregular verbs. What do we know about irregular verbs? They don't what? They don't have what at the end? They don't have any at the end? How do we know that they're past tense? Because they changed their what? They changed their spelling. They look like a whole different word. So talk with the people at your table for about 1 minute, and then we're going to move on. Tell them about what I just said about irregular verbs. Come on, I need to see you talking. Miss Bowman, if you see somebody talking, you give them one of those dollars. They don't have what to eat. Irregular verbs or troublesome verbs, they don't have what? That's why they're trouble. That's why there's so much trouble, because they don't have that ED at the end. share with me. I just need one person to share with me what you shared at your table. Let's see. I'm going to use, Miss Horton has a magic finger. I didn't tell you all about that, did I? But I have a magic finger. You know what I do? I do this wherever that finger lands. Ah, right there. So you tell us what you and your group discussed.
Then my group discussed that irregular birds, they trouble and they don't have no ending at the end.
And that's why they're trouble, aren't they? They don't have ED like all the rest. How do we know when it's past tense? How do we know it's a past tense verb? How do we know?
Because you always have ED.
Irregular don't have ED at the end. How do we know? We know because it changes its what?
Word.
Right. It changes a whole different word. Thank you. Give me a handshake. That's right. It's a whole different word. So let's look at this. Everybody, let me have your attention. Let's look up here. Now, whenever we have a verb, we call it the base. Okay? The base is the word without any kind of ending, without an ED, without an ING. Okay? We already talked about the first person. Everybody point to the first person. And what would you say? I. Great. Now I'm going to point to the second person, but we hardly ever use that. I'm going to point to the second person. Miss Bowman, you. You, second person. So if I'm the first person, Miss Bowman is the second person. You know what? There's a third person in the room. You are a third person. You are a third person. You are a third. What's your name? Huh? Zana. Third person. Sammy. Third person. Isaiah. Third person. Braylon. Third person. Who is the second person? Raise your hand. Tell me the second person. Point to the second person. You. Everybody point to the first person. I. No. I. Point to you. What? And if you were to talk about you, you would say what? I. First person, I. Second person, point to second person. You. And the third person, if you and I are talking, I, you, third person. Third person. Third person. How many of you got that? All right, let's look up here. Because we're going to, I know it may seem a little hard, but we're going to talk about it. We're going to have fun. Let's look at our base words. Who could tell me what Miss Horton said about the base word? What about the base word? The base word what? Doesn't have anything at the end. It's just a verb. Let's look at call. Okay? What is the past tense of call? Thank you for raising your hand and not yelling out. Called. What is the progressive tense of call? Calling. Very good. So we have call, we have play, we have walk, and bless. These are all regular verbs. Now, when I talk about the past tense of call, what's the difference in the base and the past? Who can just tell me the difference. So, Ms. Horton, the difference between these two are?
The difference between these two are that call has nothing at the end and call has something at the end.
What does it have at the end?
ED.
And what does that ED tell us?
Future tense.
The ED tell us what?
Future tense.
Future tense. Does the ED tell us future tense, boys and girls?
Past tense.
Past tense. Very good. Ms. Bowman, you must have been teaching them future tense, haven't you? And that is so good. You will learn a little bit more about future tense a little bit later on. Okay? Now, irregular or troublesome verbs. Now remember, think about what do we want to call these? Irregular or troublesome. We know they give us trouble because what?
Don't have the word.
Don't have ED at the end. What do they have?
ING.
What do they have? So how do we know that they're past? Raise your hand. How do we know they're past tense? It doesn't have anything at the end, but how do we know it's past tense?
Because it doesn't have ED.
Right, but how do we know that it's a past tense irregular verb? A past tense troublesome verb. How do we know that, Kelsey?
Because it doesn't